Good evening. It's Joyful Christian Hermit. Here's the recipe for St. Polycarp Soup. This was the cover of the cookbook. Beyond the Open Door, I called it, and then I had a little intro, and it's quite a lot of recipes. People started volunteering recipes. Volunteers volunteered some recipes. I had started out, and then I would name them after saints. We have all kinds of stuff here. And then I had done these drawings before. I used up stuff I had before in paper stock. Sort of dark, you can't see. Because I had done a cookbook for a Lutheran church years before. These were some of my herbal drawings. I did like little pen and ink, different herbs. So for the dividers, can't remember what that is. I think that was rosemary or something. Anyway, like we have St. Martin of Tours black bean soup, different soups, all kinds of soups. There were I think there was over 200 pages. And I collated it all by hand around my dining room table I had made out of 100-year-old doors, beautiful doors, mahogany, and they were out in the trash across the street at the trash pickup. So I had fun. I've had a lot of fun in life. This was after I was kicked out, but they wanted to do this. Then I volunteered to type it all up and everything, and then of course I made errors. Those fortunately but I had a scripture for the different saints, for the different soups. And then on the back, I did write-ups of the saints. So it says here, St. Polycarp was a very early convert to Christianity in about the year 80. Oh, this is more information I'd forgotten about. Getting excited here. Here's some glasses. All set. He became a disciple of St. John, so he knew firsthand the teachings of Jesus by the disciple whom Jesus loved. St. John ordained Polycarp the bishop of Smyrna before St. John was exiled to Patmos. Polycarp went on to lead the church in Smyrna for 70 years. About the year 158, St. Polycarp went to Rome, but was apprehended and condemned to death by fire. Well, fire didn't condemn him, but he was going to be killed by fire. Just notice that little goof. However, the fire merely arched about his head, not touching his body. A miracle it was, indeed. Next, the executioners pierced him with a sword, and Polycarp bled so much that the fire about him was extinguished. He remained unharmed. I didn't realize this. They didn't stab him to death after all. They tried. St. Polycarp did eventually die about the year 166. So 8 years later he died. His bones are still preserved in a church in Rome. And I had this scripture from Hebrews. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us rid ourselves of every burden and sin that clings to us and persevere in running the race that lies before us while keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, the leader and perfecter of faith. But I had all these in piles around my dining room table. I couldn't do the whole cookbook at once, collate a full one, but I would do it by sections. And I always would lead with my right leg going around the table. Then I'd turn directions. It took me a long time, but I still have. In fact, it's turned into like a clot. I popped a huge vein in my right front of my leg, right shin. That's my reminder of I did it as prayers for all the people who had turned on me. That's what you have to do when you have some horrible thing happen. That was like one of the worst things that happened was, being scapegoated out of my own soup kitchen. And just the ugliness that went on, that the kitchen ladies, they targeted me, that the school kitchen staff, 2 women, They didn't the other people, but I think probably because I was a convert and they knew it. I don't know. The devil is really nasty and gets into people, and they act in ways that you would never, ever dream Christians would act. It's just hard to fathom, but it happens. And we have to keep going and make offerings. So, part of me didn't want to do any more. I was kicked out, but I did it because because of the volunteers and because of all the people who were receiving the soups. So we did over 200 cookbooks, and they were given out as a Christmas gift. Yeah, I think it was 1999 that they took them out with the deliveries to everyone who received soup, because a lot of the people would love the soups and ask, oh, could we have recipes? And there were desserts and muffins of all kinds. And so here's St. Polycarp Soup. His feast day is February 23rd, is written on it. And I think I'm just going to stick it up on the screen so you can copy it. Just hold on your video, put it on pause so you can copy this. But it has, I'll tell you the ingredients. 2 quarts of chicken stock, a tablespoon olive oil, half cup diced bacon, 1/2 cup chopped onion, 1/4 cup green pepper, 1 tablespoon minced garlic, 4 bay leaves, 6 ounces of sliced kielbasa, a 6-ounce ham shank, 2 cups of red kidney beans, 1 teaspoon Creole seasoning, that's the spice, and a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, so that's hot, fiery, 1 teaspoon of salt. Then you cook 1.5 cups cooked rice separately. A dollop of that goes on top of the finished soup with sprinkles, a little bit of, says 6 teaspoons of chopped green onions, but however, and I always tend to augment vegetables. Like I know I put in more green pepper and onion and probably more kielbasa in it, or I don't know, maybe I didn't add too much more, but I probably did more than 1/4 cup of green peppers, but anyway, well, I don't know. This was, I think, the 3rd or 4th week of doing it. By week 3, I don't think I was still cooking in my kitchen anymore. I think, yes, the convent let me use their old kitchen. It was bigger than mine, and volunteers had started. So they would just drive to the convent and help do the delivery and the cooking. But by then, it like doubled or tripled each week. First week, I had 13 people I served, so that'd be 13 quarts. The next week, it was like 26 quarts. I was cooking at home. The third week, we jumped up to 40 something. The 4th week, we cooked this though. This would have been the 4th week. We finally got the one priest. He finally let us have it in that parish. So we used the one parish's kitchen. But we simply outgrew that. Plus he was being ornery. So we just went over to where the Catholic school had their kitchen, which was larger, still not big, but they ended up, we were at 500 quarts of soup. It grew and grew and grew. It's way down now, but if I had still been in it, see, what you have to do is change things. You can't have the same old soups. You have to, change routine. Just even to keep the volunteers more interested. And then they started cutting corners on didn't want to do the preparation work. But part of that was getting the volunteers to come on Saturday night after the Saturday evening Mass and get to know each other, having fun, chopping vegetables. But some grew tired of that, so they got an automatic vegetable chopper, a big, big, huge thing. I think we wrote a grant for that or something. I wrote a grant also, or we got a donation from a sorority. Older women's sorority got a new refrigerator because the kitchen ladies would lock up their refrigerators. We couldn't use them. It got to be bad, and even where the pots and pans, they locked them. So one time, a doctor was our chief cook. I think he still is doing it. And he loved helping, and his wife too, but he got bolt cutters and cut the lock to get our pots and pans out. It wasn't theirs, it was for whoever used the kitchen. And we always left it spotless. When we were done, then they would come in and use it during the week, weekdays. So it wasn't, it just got insane. But when I was out, it was amazing. It was like their anger went out. These two women had so focused, the kitchen ladies for the school, had so focused their hatred on me. Because I had started it. Even though, no one really talked about that. I didn't want anyone to talk about it. And if anything was ever in a newspaper, they weren't to say that, because it really wasn't me who started it. It was the Virgin Mary in a vision to me. And it was a penance I was doing. So I didn't want to get into all that. But anyway, here's the recipe. And you just use a big pot. But we had probably, by the time we made it, if we were up to, I think, 65 quarts. So we were using some big pots then. But here, let's see. I'll just hold it like that. And then when you you just pause on your video and then copy it down. Oh, I'll get you the little scripture for him. On the front, I had one in front and one in the back. We like scripture. It fits with everything, doesn't it? And then I had my own little binding machine that I'd had for my little business I had when I was, right after I was disabled. I started my little potpourri publishing company and did a little children's book and did a church cookbook for the church I belonged to then, which was a Lutheran church. And wasn't a little cookbook, it was pretty big. For that one, I did a rose on the front and then hand tinted watercolored it, each one. I had it printed, I just tinted in. It was very simple. Wasn't anything really like an artist would do. But I did my best. So, okay, you probably have had that paused, and so I'll put the back on there in case you want to get his information. Some more information that I had. I didn't even remember it. I've had too much life. Too many things happen. Too many memories. It's just as well I don't remember details anymore. I used to be a real detail memory person. Thanks be to God, he's emptying me out. Emptying out my memory. But I do remember, because I probably need to get that vein taken out. So the doctor thought it had a clot in it. He was supposed to line it up, but he forgot. That's Dr. Duffer. That's what I call the one doctor. I gotta find a new one, but I just don't want to go. Don't want to go to any doctors for as long as I can. Okay. Hope you enjoy that soup. It was only made the one time. It's too different. That we had other ones. I mean, like, I did this one. This was from my potato soup. Oh, no, I don't put ham in mine. So this was somebody else. St. Agatha potato cheese soup. but I had my potato soup in it. And then, what others? I did the very first soup was St. Paul's conversion soup, because it was that week. And right here, St. Paul's conversion soup. And it was just a hamburger soup that I made. Had turnips in it, asparagus, tomatoes, green beans, onions, carrots, cabbage, broccoli, V8 juice, extra water, corn, potatoes, and green peppers, and garlic, beef bouillon cubes with water. Did I mention the green beans? Parsley. So that I would make that for my kids. I add whatever vegetables, that's and people seem to like them, but they did. I don't think they made, turnips and no, too different, and asparagus. But my kids ate it, my kids had to have healthy food. Here's my potato soup, St. Bridget potato soup. Now my kids did like that. It was pretty basic, but tasty. Just potatoes, onions, celery, butter, not margarine. People don't use it. Oh, and St. Apollonia chicken and dumplings. Now the chicken and dumplings I got from a woman when I was very, very ill. I had a collapse one winter. The Lord told me something was going to happen. When he also said, be an enemy to Mondays. And by that Monday, it was the year before. It was in 97. But it was after that priest had raised his hand, was going to hit me. And he scared me. He trapped me in the sanctuary after evening mass and kept trying to get me to yell at me. And I kept trying to get out other doors, and he has so long legs, and I can't run with my bad back. And I had my little girl that I would take home. She was with me, and I found her face down on a pew further down, scared, because she knew he was mad at me, because I was going to take communion to her dad. Her dad had asked. And that just triggered that priest. When I held my pyx out, I was a Eucharistic minister, so I could. But wow, he had issues with me big time. And he just ranted about how he was the priest there. Who was I taking communion to? And, other people would, but I said, well, he should ask me. I'm the priest here, You think you're the priest here? Oh, he was yelling at me when he finally caught me, trapped me. I couldn't get out. But I stood up for it, though I said no. But then when he raised his hand and it just stopped like this, just right before he was going to hit me right in the face. And he left then. His hand froze, and he turned and went into the rectory. It was just a hallway into the rectory from the sanctuary. And I got little Amanda and told her not to worry about things and hope she didn't hear anything. But she was face down with her head in her hands on the pew, laying down on the pew. I had to go looking for her because she saw, but and took communion to her dad. I had already gotten it during communion line. It's what you're supposed to do is if you're taking communion to a sick person, then you put your pyx out and the priest puts it in. And I could tell the way he glared at me when he put Jesus in that I was in trouble I had no idea what, but I knew he was on a rampage. But anyway, it was after that, though, that He called me, though. By the time I got home, the phone rang. And he went at it again on the phone and said, well, I don't think we meant to talk to each other like that. And I said, I didn't talk like anyway. I said, I was not at all. But I said I couldn't let you just continue on like that. And I got off the phone, and the daughter who had wanted to convert didn't. What was that? Because she could tell it was hot. And then it wasn't long after his secretary, who was my friend, and would warn me what he was up to, when he was after me for something. Mad and envious, resentful. And she had told him, you're upsetting. My son's name's Joseph. Upsetting Joseph. Oh, I didn't mean to hurt Joseph. I wouldn't want to hurt Joseph. And so later he said something to me. And I did say, if you don't want to hurt Joseph, don't hurt his mother. And he did look at me then and sort of had a smile. He realized. He knows, that priest knew better. The devil gets into people, gets into priests. And we just have to keep praying and make offerings for the person. Make offerings. And then just keep our nose to the grindstone and keep going forward as best we can and make prayer offerings for people. But I in 97, I had this warning from God that something was going to happen with me. And I had a big collapse. And I wasn't able to get up until Easter. It was right before Easter that I recovered. I was unable to get out of bed. I think it was just too much for me. The church and the priest acting like that, and people knew, and parishioners, some of them were just very nice. They'd come over, and the assistant priest insisted I was brought communion every single day. Well, word went out, I guess. They figured something bad had happened to me from the other priests. So they were very kind. They even wanted to try to get permission to have mass in my bedroom to see if I could get up. And my spiritual dog would come over, and it was quite something. I didn't know if I'd be able to get up ever again. I had a massive collapse. I would have been 45 years old then, just 45. And my kids were worried about me. The two were in college, and my son would come home after school and run into the bedroom. Are you alive, Mommy? Are you alive? He's so worried. I just couldn't get up. Everything was emptied from me. Worse than this, it was a different kind of thing. It was a spiritual thing. It was, in addition to, I suffered. I suffered for that priest. I know that's what it was. I was laid out for the soul of that priest in exchange, to pray for him and to sacrifice. My body was being sacrificed. That was a very naughty thing to do, what he did. Acting like that. Having such anger against me. And nearly hitting me. Must have been his guardian angel stopped his hand, because it just stopped, like right before he was going to come right down on me. He was a big, tall man, like 6'2" or something. Big guy. No, not overweight or anything, but very strong. He swam every morning at the Y. Get up early. He's very disciplined, but And so anyway, I this one I couldn't eat either. I lost a lot of weight, and so this one woman, this lovely woman, she would come to see me. She and her husband and her daughter, her adult daughter, and she brought me chicken and dumplings that were so delicious. She says, "Try eating these. I think you could eat these." Bless her heart. And I was able to eat those chicken and dumplings. That sort of broke through so I could start eating again. I was down, I think, well, from January 24th until Easter was like the first week in April. I was able to get up Holy Week finally, and finally made it to Mass. I don't think I was well enough for Easter Vigil that year. Maybe I was, I don't know, but it was that week I was able to finally get up and move. But she'd brought these chicken and dumplings, so I asked her for the recipe because I thought it was perfect for Saint Apollonia. Saint Apollonia chicken and dumplings, because her feast day's February 9th. That was the second soup I made, because Apollonia had all her teeth knocked out. So I thought, well, she would have been able to eat this because it had these dumplings that were made out of Bisquick mix. Oh, they were tasty. And they were dropped down in the chicken, with the chicken and the flavoring and the onion and water. It was just delicious. Excellent. So, and that, I had a miracle with that, because somebody had given her, she's patroness of dentists, and invoked against toothaches and gum diseases. But they built a fire, and they knocked out all her teeth because she refused to sacrifice to idols. And so an angry mob surrounded her. But she loved the poor, and one time somebody gave her a basket of choice apples. Choice apples, it was said. And instead of for her, she gave them to the poor. And the person who gave them to her said, "But I wanted them for you." And she says, "What is mine is theirs." So with that meal, I so wanted to buy choice apples. But I was out of money because, chicken, I bought all this other stuff. But my godmother at the time, she was very pleased with what I was doing with the soup kitchen. And she gave me a $20 bill. She says, "Here's, put this toward what your expenses," because you're paying for all this. And that was right before I knew I had to sell my house, because I had 2 daughters in college, and I had to get it sold at my really nice home that I'd had built for the kids when we moved back to Indiana, just so they'd feel good about moving and about themselves and friends over and stuff, because we'd lived pretty rough before we could get out of California. We had been in an apartment for a while while the house was built. So anyway, it was just enough to get these gorgeous red delicious apples back in the Midwest in February. So I spent that $20 on those choice apples to have it all be Apollonia themed, Saint Apollonia. And it was sort of a miracle to have the money to do that then. It came just a few cents under $20. I had to get enough for each person, for each quart of soup that was going out to each person. So anyway, but she wouldn't do what they wanted, so they built a fire. And instead, she was pretending to think it over, like, well, maybe she would relent and do what they wanted, deny Christ. But she only did it because she wanted to be the one to jump herself into the fire. So she leapt into the fire herself as a show of strength of, you're not going to get me. I'm not going to give you the privilege of throwing me in. I'm going to throw myself in for Christ. That's when it is that we offer. She was offered her sufferings for Christ right there, doing that. Anyway, that was the cookbook, and I think everybody liked it, and they wanted to do more. And they asked if I had given everything, all my papers, all my everything, including the printing sheets for this cookbook, to the volunteers when I was out of it, when I was removed. Well, and it wasn't, actually, it was my spiritual father who said I would never go back. He was so upset that the parish priest had used 5 sermons against me that weekend from the pulpit. And that was an outrage. It was a sacrilege of the Mass to do that. Just to use it to talk about a person. And he lied about me, negative things. It was really outrageous. Never had been done before, and never since. And but nothing happened to that priest for doing that either. I mean, it's crazy, but it was the devil, But God wanted me out of it. God wanted me out of it so that I'd be a hermit. He called me to hermit life. But my spiritual father was so upset. He says, "You're not going back ever." He says, "They're going to have to fend for themselves." But looking back, my body, it was a miracle I was able to do it. Stand on those hard cement floors and in the kitchen and do all that. And people, it was growing by leaps and bounds, and we'd added furniture and clothing, we were becoming, it was wonderful. We got that bus and all, but found a little school bus. That was a miracle. And it was $500. And that evening, a man came up to me and says, "I happen to have an extra $500. Would that be of any use to you guys? So pleased with what you're doing." And he was from the other parish. So it brought both the warring parishes together. That soup kitchen did, but not anymore. It's pretty much just the one parish now. It really, you can't lose the spiritual and stuff. It became more a function of what they were doing rather than the spiritual part of it. It's the spiritual that adds the sparkle. The spiritual adds the life to something and has the growth with it then. If it becomes just another outrage, a volunteer task, then no, so I think that's why it's gone down and why they had more trouble getting volunteers. If you keep the spiritual in something, God will keep pouring people in. People who need and people to help make it happen. And also what had happened to me, people in town found out, the other volunteers, because it had become other churches were helping, other denominations who had been anti-Catholic were helping. It was bringing the whole town together. But they weren't at all impressed with how I'd been mistreated like that. And that was a shame. And the priest even called a volunteer meeting. He wanted to take it over, see. He thought he could do that. And he didn't realize a lot of the volunteers were Protestants who'd known me since I was born and were volunteering because they thought it was so great, knew me. And we're starting to get to know Catholics and thought, well, they're not so bad after all. But then he went to that meet, and I didn't say anything about what happened to me to anyone. But the priest at the meeting tore into me again in front of the people who knew me. And they left. They never went back to volunteer. So he really did it in for himself. And he took what had become a wonderful opportunity for the Protestants and the Catholics in that town to finally get together, and he made it worse. So, And the Protestants expected me to come back. The Methodist minister called me, begged me to come, said, we'll do it in our kitchen. They had a beautiful kitchen. We'll do anything you want. You tell us what to do. You'll have the people helping. You'll have the funds to do it. We're behind you. Come back. Come back to us. How could you stay with people who treat you like that? See, they don't understand. It's not the people. It's the church. It's Christ. It's the Mass. It's the history. It's the spiritual life. That's what it is. That's what is in the Christian church that Christ started. It's not people misbehaving. Christ didn't start that. We do that all by ourselves. It's not people being ugly to one another, or resentful, or envious, or thinking that, that they wanted the power. The power? Oh, what? There was no power. It was a pyramid shape. It was management by objective, and we had teams of people. There was no one in charge, except I had to make a decision, though, because it was becoming impossible for us to use that kitchen. But it was because the school principal was against me by then. He was angry at me because he had done some bad things with the girls, 8th grade girls. He had harassed them. Sexual harassment scared them. Their mothers came to me because they knew I'd be the one who would do something about it. So I wrote letters to both priests, got to do something about this, and please let me know within 3 days, or I'm going to have to write to the bishop because this is serious. It's because the one priest I knew, he didn't know if he'd take it seriously, probably not. And he didn't. So I wrote to the bishop, and the bishop came. And because the secretary is my friend, she told me that, he was very upset, and they had to start supervising that principal. And it was, I think, 2 years later, I was even I had to leave town. It got so bad. It wasn't good for me to even be there anymore. But it was okay. I was ready to move on. And, but they found out the principal didn't even have he was a fraud. I thought he was. The vibes were bad for him. And he knew. See, he knew that I sensed. So he really took after me in a bad way. He'd come up to me, he'd smoke cigars, and he'd just blow it right up in my face and say, I'll get you. Oh, it was demonic. And that's when he's the one that said we could no longer use the gym. There was the kitchen right there and then the gym. And the delivery people would gather in the gym with the tables, and the soups would be taken, put in the big coolers and thermos things and taken out to them. Because there was no room for the volunteers, all the delivery people, to come into that kitchen. There was hardly room for the cooks in the kitchen. It was tiny. It was tight squeeze. And then with all of the equipment in there, it was extra, and we had those huge soup pots. You couldn't have volunteers walking right by that stove. So we were going to temporarily move to the Methodist church, which was our standby church anyway, if there were weddings using the gym and the school kitchen for their receptions. Then we automatically would use the Methodist church, since a lot of them were volunteers, plus the United Brethrens were too, a lot of them. Plus the court system started sending young people who had gotten in trouble but weren't in prison. They had to work off community hours. So we were doing outreach with them. They would come and volunteer. They had to. But, we provided. The volunteers were great. They were all lovely and holy. But just the devil got into some other people. But at least we could have used, and people were sort of happy about the Methodist Church's kitchen was hardly used ever. And it had elevator, and a great place to drive up. We wouldn't have had trouble with all the parking issues after Mass. But this priest said that I was trying to make it Protestantize it. He said that from the pulpit too, which wasn't at all the truth. It was just we didn't have any options. If the school principal wasn't going to let us use the gym anymore, it gotten into a big brouhaha, and the priest wouldn't stop the problem. And I said, well, we can't use the kitchen then. We can't have the delivery people come in there, and children would help deliver too with their parents. Parents would bring their children. They would be the ones to go up to the doors, which delighted the elderly recipients to have children deliver their soup. So it's just too dangerous. We were pushing it with the fire marshal as it was. So anyway, it was quite a ordeal. So it was hard for me in a way, it was a sacrifice for me to do all that work and collate it all. And I paid for the materials, for the paper, and I used up my own cover stock I already had. Or maybe I bought that. I had to buy extra, I think, cover stock. And OSV let us print it. A friend of mine was the managing editor there. So he arranged for it to use their copy machine. And I paid for a printer in town to cut it into it's such a huge amount of papers, 200 pages, and we did 200 copies. So, but it took all the sting away because I offered it in gratitude for the volunteers for keeping it going. I was grateful that they did. And amazingly, with me out, then that principal let them use the gym, see. So it was, the devil doesn't like me too much, I will have to say. Now, it's been better just laying low in here. Being a hermit is best. So, except, the one person, but I think she's maturing and not going as realizes how ridiculous. Maybe this time she has. I don't know. I'm not going to see what she writes anymore. So, hope she can buck up and use her brains for something other than obsessing on me. In anger and ugliness. Well, that's the recipe, and a little more about the open door. I've told this story before. It's been a while. But something like even looking at the cookbook brings it all back. The good and the ugly. The good, the bad, and the ugly. But God wanted me out for it to be a hermit. That was practically right away he called me to hermit. Made it very clear, hermit. It had been 13 years prior that I was told I would need to hibernate like a bear. That was the foretelling of my hermit vocation by my grandmother, who came in the night in a vision. First vision I'd ever had like that. Well, the one with Teresa of Avila in the classroom, the clinical psych class I was taking. But of just somebody right there by my bed. With Teresa of Avila, I was like taken in to where she was. She didn't come out to me or to where I was. It was different. So, life is interesting, and it really is best to go with the flow. I cried and cried and cried. I thought I was just crushed. But I knew to obey my spiritual father. when he says you're not going back ever, after what that priest vilified me to the whole parish from the pulpit. It was his sermon, weekend sermon. And then that he didn't even have the volunteer meeting yet, where he did it again and lost a lot of the volunteers and created Catholic scandal in the town. Even yet, my Protestant friends, they don't think well of Catholics for what had happened to me with that. But they defended me. People would going around saying I was crazy and horrible things. And they would argue with them, defend me, and I tell them, please don't. I found out they were, even at the public library, they'd get into it with Catholics. If they'd overhear Catholics bad-mouthing me, which they did a lot, they would, except for Anna, the one woman, Saint Anna, Blessed Anna, the doctor who had died, his wife, his widow, and she'd been widowed again. The one that I babysat for her kids, and she knew me and knew my family, and I knew hers, and she stuck with me through that. She came to my house even, and was worried about me after that weekend of the sermons. And the volunteers too were, now few of the Catholic volunteers quit. And I'd say, no, please keep it going. But some of them were upset with what had been said about me and, felt they were done. They didn't want that ugliness either. Didn't want to be part of it. But I kept saying, don't hurt the people. Don't hurt the recipients. And, please keep it going. And the rest of them did. It dwindled. They didn't get new people too much, but they have over the years gotten new people. People got old and died. We had old volunteers, but it was really miraculous. The Virgin Mary wanted it. It was a penance for me, and when my penance was complete, God knew I needed to suffer a huge suffering. That was another, we have many crucifixions in our lives. And that was a big one for me. That was a crucifixion. My divorce was a crucifixion. My surgery and all that, and losing my career and income drop and everything, that was losing my back, basically. All that pain all the time. Now, that was a crucifixion. But see, and part of it too, God teaches us, don't get overly attached. We can put your heart into things, put your heart and soul in to what God's will is, but you've got to be willing to let it go, and look to see why God had it happen, why God let it unfold. And right then, Dale Francis, the man I talked about the other day, his daughter had called and said that her dad in his will had this thousands of dollars that he wanted donated to an outreach of some sort. And they said he would want it to go to your soup kitchen. we want to do that. But it had to be in there was a stipulation, and it had to be connected. But since I wasn't in it anymore, they wouldn't do it then. They said, no, it had to be you, you had to be, that was why we liked it, because you were running it, and we could trust that it would, uphold what all it had been doing. I think he wanted it ecumenical also, so and bringing the town together. And it was only maybe 2 weeks after that priest had done his sermons against me. So they lost that for that kind of money, that big bequest that we would have had. But all works out. It all works out. God knows what he's doing. And I got over it. We have to learn to let go of things, and to, it was Thomas à Kempis in Imitation of Christ, who you have to be calm. You have to be calm. You can't react. It's not worth it to get upset over things, and just have a calm. And how can we have peace, as he said in that little scripture, or not scripture, but the writing from yesterday that I shared. I think it was the Lenten Uplift number 14. React with calm. React with calm. And love. And then, as I say, the best thing for me when I have things happen is to make sacrifices on behalf of the people or the person involved, who the devil had used for something, to be naughty. Naughty devil would get into someone. And then I'd offer. I refinished a very difficult painted door. Refinished it on behalf of the priest who had done those sermons. It took me maybe it was 2 years to get that thing finished. Both sides. It was very detailed. It was a beautiful old door, antique door, with old glass in it, and I scripted above it for the priest, and I showed it to that priest eventually, that was the door that I'd worked on, refinished. And I said, I did it on behalf of you. And I think it registered with him. He never did apologize to me, ever, though. This was the second priest. This wasn't the one that was going to get me. This is the one that had the sermons against me. So I'm best not in groups. I think God really wants me hermit in the desert, and just to lay low, remain hidden. And love, though, pray for everyone. And now with my back so bad I can't go and do anyway. I get 2 rose bushes cut down this afternoon. About killed me. Oh my goodness. So I have to build up somehow. I don't know how I'll get that concrete going, but God will provide. That was the motto that started, I started saying that in the soup kitchen days when I was doing it myself the first 2 weeks at home. God will provide, God will provide. 3rd week was St. Apollonia. Oh, no, 3rd week was a different one. 4th week was St. Polycarp. Enjoy your St. Polycarp soup. God bless his real presence in us. I guess I must be in a real mood, or memories are coming back, repeating things, but it doesn't upset me to go back over things, and it won't in your lives either, because you start seeing where God led, that he had a purpose for it. And actually, it was only just maybe 3 days or 2 days after that, my spiritual dosage, you're not going back ever. And that following Monday, that was the Sunday, was the sermon, Saturday and Sunday. That Monday morning, I had to go where he was for Mass, because he said you're not to go to that parish either. And I couldn't go to the other parish. That was the priest that was going to hit me. So I went to the convent, and afterwards, it was St. John Chrysostom's feast day. And he said, just be grateful that you're not run out of your own town. Like he was killed, but he was run out of his own town and then killed later. And he says, just be thankful you haven't been run out. And that was the day he said, you meditate on Joan of Arc, because it was Catholics who helped put wood on her fire. Bishops who condemned her and Catholics themselves who threw the wood on the fire. So he said, you meditate on her. And then I think it was the next morning or 2 mornings later was when I woke up and Jesus was standing by the bed, this bed. I was sleeping on that right side of it. I'm on the left side now. On the right side, he just stood right there, and he put this crucifix right down into my heart. And it burned and burned. Then it got so sweet, sweet, sweet. And I understood. He didn't say a word, but I understood. This is the pain of suffering and of crucifixion, but it's also sweet, and it's also the love. Jesus was reminding me how much he loved me and that he was with me. And then it wasn't, maybe it's right, soon after that I was told, that for the hermit life, that I was called to the hermit life within days. So, see, God moves us along where he wants. I thought that the soup kitchen, I would have been happy doing that the rest of my life, to stay there in my hometown and do that. And we were going to have it grown. We were going to get the downtown had died out. We were going to get a storefront and have scriptures and coffee and donut and lunch for people, and things people could come in and talk, and over problems or anything, we were going to get people who were counselors to volunteer and come, and we were going to talk spiritual with them, spiritual life, and help them with problems or whatever. And then just be a place they could come, get out of the cold and rain and have a cup of coffee or tea. And but we never got that off the ground. But I guess the Methodists did, though. They do lunches. I think once a week they have lunch. They use their kitchen for that. They realized, well, we can do something. And they did. So they couldn't understand, that the minister couldn't understand. But finally he did say, he says, I've always secretly wanted to be Catholic, but I can't. Since he was a Methodist minister, he wouldn't have a job anymore. And the United Brethren minister told me that one point. He's the one that got me started to begin with. Took me out to the convent to talk to a nun out there, because I'd had mortification written in my room. It was big white letters against the dark. Mortification. Back in like 1992. And I called him. I said, "Do you know what this means?" Or maybe 93. He said, "No," but he says, my wife is a nurse and she works at the convent in their healthcare unit. And some sister would know. So he arranged for me, and he drove me out there and introduced me to this Sister Lucy. And later when I converted, he says, "I'd really love to." He moved to another town. He was assistant pastor, and he was then a pastor in a nearby town. In fact, it's a town where one of our viewers lived, a man who was willing, if I'd lived closer, he was going to come with his sons and help me finish my house. But I didn't say where I had been originally, but he was from a town nearby where this United Brethren minister went for his next assignment as a lead minister. But I talked to him on the phone one time, and he said that he really would love to be Catholic, but he couldn't. He had his family to consider and his income. He had children, and that was his job. Yeah, that's how he earned his living. So I said, well, you can read books. And learn things that way, but he wouldn't have Mass. He wouldn't have Mass. But I don't have it now except in my heart. And I can look online. It's not the same to look online as being there in his real presence. There's nothing quite like a Catholic Mass. If you are blessed and open and tune into, really fall in love with the Mass. It's glorious. So I recommend anyone going. You don't have to have communion. Anyone can go just to experience it. See if it resonates with you. Sure did with me. I died and going to heaven, literally. God bless his real presence in us. Again, enjoy the soup. I just have all these thoughts. I guess I'm in a reminiscing mode.